Welcome back to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. On today's episode, we're introducing a new blog series on the PBATS website titled Tales of the Tape, My Journey Through AA Athletic Training by Adam Sparks, the head athletic trainer for the Pensacola Blue Wahoos of the Miami Marlins organization. This season, Adam will be taking us inside the life of a AA athletic trainer, and he's here with us today to talk about what you can expect from the series. Enjoy the show. All right, Adam, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. We are super excited to have you on for the show for your first time. Got a cool announcement coming up here later. For those who aren't familiar with you and your career, first of all, Adam is an athletic trainer within the Miami Marlins organization, spending this season at AA Pensacola. But Adam, share some information about your background, where you're from, kind of what drew you to athletic training, and kind of what led you to the position you're in Pensacola right now.
Yeah. First off, Sam, I just want to, thank you for having me on here today. This is really cool. Something I'm really looking forward to doing. But like kind of a little bit on my background. So I went to undergrad in West Alabama, a little small Division II school there in kind of west part of Alabama. And then from there, I went to grad school down in Columbus, Georgia at Columbus State. So I was down there for a couple of years as a GA and a few months as an assistant. And then, then I kind of got into, full-time positions. But I guess what kind of drew me into athletic training kind of back before that was, all growing up, I really enjoyed, playing sports, especially baseball. And, I always enjoyed, as I got older, I really enjoyed, the body and just kind of how the body works and all that kind of stuff. So, and it was one night I was watching TV and a football game was on and, somebody got hurt. I saw the three guys go out on the field to check on them. And I was like, man, that sounds really cool. Yeah. And then that just kind of led to the community college I was attending at the time. I found out I had a pre-athletic training program and I was like, man, that sounds interesting. So I reached out to the guy that was over it, had a meeting with him and, it was like, hey, this sounds pretty cool and something, that I might be interested in doing. So I started taking some classes and, started shadowing some, local ATs in the area. And I mean, here we are now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And talk to us a bit about your road to once you got, out of school and working as a professional. What were the stops? What have the stops been for you in professional athletic training?
So I guess I kind of got started. So it would have been the summer after I graduated from grad school. I started, trying to figure out, what I wanted to do, what full-time jobs were open, what did I want to do, what setting did I want to be at. And that summer I came across the PBATS website, and some of the, job postings, and I saw that they had one or two, like summer internship, positions open. Sure. And it just kind of piqued my interest. And I said, okay, this sounds pretty cool. Let's give it a shot. So I applied for them. And I didn't get them, but it just kind of set in my stomach, in the back of my head. And as time went on, we got into the fall, like it just started kind of eating at me. I was like, man, I really want to do this. Like, I want to give this a shot. So it was one day, in October, one night, I just sat down in the office there. And I just made a blind resume and a blind cover letter. And I found the contact sheet on PBATS for all the minor league medical coordinators. And I just sent out a blind resume and cover letter to every minor league medical coordinator, asking, hey, do you have any positions open, that type thing. And long story short, I got in contact. Dave Walker, he was a longtime coordinator with the Orioles. He reached out and, long story short, I ended up taking a position with them and started with them in February of 2018.
Okay. That's it goes to show how, being resourceful and persistent, I think, is hugely important for all athletic trainers in college looking to break in. It's not going to be for everybody, I should say. It's not going to be, hey, you apply for an internship, you get it, and you start moving up the ranks. A lot of people out there like yourself, Adam, have had to kind of take untraditional ways to get in contact and kind of be resourceful and find out how that works. With regard to your career so far, any main or key mentors or influencers who kind of shaped your approach to the profession thus far?
Yeah, I think I'd have to say Dave Walker. I owe a lot to him just from the standpoint he gave me my first shot, in pro ball. He hired me with no pro ball experience, and just the amount of things that I learned from him, on just everyday stuff from athletic training. I owe a lot to him, just, for everything that he taught me, everything he showed me, and just the way he showed me to go about stuff. I owe a lot to him from that perspective.
Yeah, Dave was definitely a lot of experience in the game, so great for you to be able to learn from someone like that. Well, Adam, I do want to talk about your day to day in the season that's going on right now that just started a couple weeks ago. One thing that's super cool this season for you is we just launched yesterday a new series for pbats.com titled Tales of the Tape: My Journey as a AA Athletic Trainer. Anyone interested in that series who's listening can check out the first chapter of that just went live yesterday. Just go to pbats.com/blog and you'll be able to find that there. And we're really excited because the first chapter, titled The Calm Before the Storm, kind of walking through the first week for you, headed off to the affiliate in Pensacola. And for those listeners out there, we'll be following Adam every week. He'll be updating that blog, sharing kind of what it's like for life as a minor league athletic trainer. I think really, really cool insights for anyone looking to break into the game. So I first want to chat with you a bit. What kind of put you in a position where you wanted to share your career and your life this year in minor league AA baseball, and how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so I think what originally, going back to the off season, like right after I was hired, with the Marlins here, I had a meeting with Corey, our assistant, or Connor. I'm sorry, Connor. He's our assistant, director here.
Yeah.
And we were having a talk, and he gave me an assignment. He says, "Hey, I want you to make a vision statement." And part of that vision statement was, some personal and professional goals. And one of those professional goals for, 1 to 2 years down the road was get more involved in PBATs. Well, we had a call to go over it. He was like, "Hey, like, why wait? Why not do it now? Why not try to get involved now?" So that kind of jump started that, wanting to get involved with PBATs, and then, rolling into spring training, when we brought Corey on, obviously, he's well known in the PBATs world. He's done a lot of work for you guys, and had, started having some conversations with him about, hey, I'd like to get involved. Like, what can I do? How do I get involved? And, that's when, we connected during the spring and had a little call. And, with me, I was always kind of drawn to the education side, just because the way I look at it is I want to help the younger me. So putting myself back in the position when I was an undergrad in grad school, I would have loved to have this kind of resource back then, and just, because I was dying to know, well, what's it like a day at an affiliate? What's it like with a day in pro ball? What does that day to day look like? So that's kind of my main goal out of this is, I want to help the younger me, and if I can help, a younger athletic trainer trying to get in the game, if this can be something that pushes them over the edge and, helps them, want to apply for a position or, whatnot. That's kind of my goal behind it. And, just trying to help that younger athletic trainer and that younger me, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's a great reason for this. And I know, when I was looking to get into baseball and the scouting side of things after playing, I would search, what does a video coordinator do? Who do I contact to get an internship? Much like you did with athletic training. And, back in those days, you would send out manila folders with your resume and a cover letter and just pray that somebody saw it and gave you a call back. And, it's such a cool time for professionals out there in athletic training to be able to have access to someone like you, which I'm super excited to share throughout the season. Getting into kind of what that looks like, just to showcase some of the stuff we'll be talking about this year. Walk us through, now you're at the affiliate in Pensacola. What's a typical game day look like for you from, when you get there to the game time?
Yeah. So for a typical, 6:05 game time, I'm usually at the park, by like 10:30 in the morning. And I'm usually here, about an hour and a half or so prior to player arrival. And I spend that time, getting the training room set up, getting things ready for the players for the day. Any kind of housekeeping, items that need to be taken care of, whether it's, I need to run down an MD note or an X-ray report or whatever that case may be, or, updating, rehab sheets or maintenance sheets for the day, getting the dugout set up for the day and all that kind of stuff. And then by that time, coaching staff starting to show up, managers, pitching coaches, and you know, I go to, just my check in with the manager and the coaching staff, if there's any updates, that morning from players from the previous night, updated on any, changes to plans or anything like that for players that might have, came up overnight in the morning. And then, by that time, players are starting to roll in. So, we're starting with, maintenance programs, rehabs, anything like that needs to be done. We try to knock that out, first part of the day. So guys can get their activation work in, their maintenance work in before they start their work. And then, we also do fatigue monitoring on our pitchers from, the previous night. We get that stuff done, before, they get involved with lifting and all that kind of stuff. So, the first part of the day there, we're really focused on, maintenance programs, activation programs, any kind of rehab, treatments, anything like that the guys might need.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that rolls into their, outside on the field stuff. So, we're outside covering that, making sure everything's okay out there. And then once they're done with their on their field work, BP, all that kind of stuff, then we transition to getting the guys ready that are playing in the game. So, the starting pitcher, whoever's in the starting lineup, whatever they might need, to be ready to play, that's what that block is in between BP and the game time. And then, on the field for, 6:05 game time. And once the game ends, we transition back inside. We do post-throw exercises for, all the guys that threw in the game. And then any post-game treatments that, anybody might need, to get them ready for the next day, any recovery work, the guys may need, that played in the game to be ready for the next day. And then, we then after that, after the game, we obviously let the directors know, hey, game's over, everything's okay, or hey, we're adding, guy X to the report for X, Y, and Z, and then we knock out notes and clean everything up and get the training room set up for the next day and head out.
Definitely more than what I think a lot of people out there who aren't familiar with the profession might think. An athletic trainer shows up before the game, sits in the dugout, does some ice and some ankle taping. That's kind of the old school mindset of what an athletic trainer did. So definitely interesting to hear kind of what really goes into it. And that's why we're so excited about the series that we have going again with chapter 1 out now at pbats.com. Well, Adam, I want to talk to you a bit about player care and kind of the development of those relationships at an affiliate site. So, you have different players every year coming through there, or you might be moving on to a different affiliate in the coming years or so forth. How do you kind of approach building trust and communication with the young athletes you're working with, who some are just eager to get to the next stop and some you might not know so well? What do you kind of what's your process for kind of building those relationships when the season gets underway?
Well, I think, the relationship and the trust part are two, those are so important, things that you've got to have, whether it doesn't matter what affiliate you're at or what level, it's so important that you gain that trust and have that good relationship with that player. And for me, it all starts with, just conversations. And it starts, back, in spring training during early camp, when you first meet the kids for the first time. And it's having those conversations with them, showing the player that you care about them, show that player that, not only do I care about you as a player, but I also care about you as a person, outside of baseball, and getting on their level, getting on their level and having a conversation with them on their level, and outside of baseball, I think it's really important that you have a conversation with them, hey, like, especially at this level, hey, how's your family doing? How's the dog doing? What are things that you like to do outside of baseball? So that player sees that, hey, not only does Adam care about me as a baseball player, but he cares about me as a person. And once you start doing that, you really start gaining that trust with that player. And then that makes everything so much easier, from a treatment standpoint, from a rehab standpoint, things that you're wanting to implement for them. It makes it so much easier when you have that relationship and that trust with that player.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'm really interested to hear your take on, Adam, is, rehab and recovery for big league players who are either at the complex or at the big league stadium. They're typically there all the time working with, the same people. When you guys have guys going up and down throughout the year at an affiliate, how do you kind of tailor rehab and recovery plans when people can kind of be going to different levels and working with different athletic trainers in your organization?
So one thing that, I like to start with is, I'll reach out to, whatever AT or PT they were working with, whether it was, down in Jupiter or a different affiliate, wherever it is. I'll have a conversation with them first and, figure out, exactly, hey, what are we dealing with? What have you guys been doing? What was your plan for them going forward as far as for the next week or whatever? And then kind of, have a conversation with them and then have a conversation with the player, when they arrive, kind of figure out where they're at, where their mind is, and then kind of bridge both parties together, figure out where are we trying to go? What is the next box we're trying to check, to make sure that, we're checking every box going down the, the checklist. So we don't skip a step and, we make sure that they're in the best possible position, going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing, that you mentioned earlier, you see a lot of athletic trainers running on the field during a minor league or major league baseball game, and that kind of sparks a lot of interest for younger students or anybody to kind of see, hey, what is that position? How could I be that person one day? When that happens, when a player goes down, unfortunately, there's an injury during a game. What's the process? I know I've always heard from so many of your colleagues across PBATs and big league and minor league baseball that, you watch the game, but you don't watch it like a fan. Your eyes are on everything that's going on with your athletes, seeing how they're moving. When someone goes down, what is the process from when you're on the field to when maybe you're back doing imaging or back doing, tests in the training room? What does that look like for someone in your position?
So for me, like you say, we watch the game, but we don't watch the game, like a fan, like fans do. So when something like that happens, first and foremost, I try to, make sure the player's calm. They're all over the place. So I try to calm them down, reassure them, hey, you're okay. Everything's fine. And I try to get them to tell me what happened, through their eyes. What happened through your eyes? What do you feel from your standpoint? And then, once we kind of go through those questions, then we kind of determine, hey, is this something that, you can continue to play with, or do we need to take you out? So once we kind of answer those questions, and hey, say the player stays in or he's removed, once we get back in the dugout, I'll let our directors know, hey, so-and-so happened, got so-and-so, he was evaluated on the field, he's staying in the game for now, and we'll reevaluate after the game. Or if it's something that he is removed, we'll let them know, hey, he's removed. And, typically we'll reevaluate that player at the end of the game after everything's done and determine, hey, do we need, is it something that we need imaging on, or, is it something that, we're going to kind of reassess tomorrow and kind of go from there. And then obviously, we'll reassess that player the next morning to see what has changed.
And with that, you mentioned Corey Trumbull, who's the director of athletic training and rehab for the Miami Marlins. He's been on the show a bunch, hosted a couple podcasts for us, very involved with PBATs and just the athletic training profession. How closely are you communicating with Corey, with front office personnel, strength coaches, just the whole group in terms of daily touch points or reports after an injury? What's that communication process look like from, AA, AAA, all the way up to Corey at the top?
Yeah, so we have our little our little thread that we message, and I mean communication is key. We can't stress enough how important it is to communicate. Regardless of what level you're at, but especially at the AA level when it's not uncommon to have some 40-man roster guys on your team, and just. And what Corey and, Connor, both, stress is like over communicate, so, and it's almost a constant, communication from that standpoint from, once players start showing up and I get updates on guys, I'll send an update to those guys. Hey, these are the updates on player X, Y, and Z. These are the plans for the day. And we kind of go from there. And as things change throughout the day, obviously, we let those guys know because, nobody likes surprises in this game, especially, from the director levels, when front office starts calling, if the front office calls, Corey and says, hey, about a certain guy and he doesn't know about it, that's just, that's not good. So, and then, after the game, during the game, if anything happens or comes up during the game, it's, hey, this is going on. This guy was removed. This guy's, got hit by a pitch, whatever the case may be. Just so those guys have all the information they need to pass along to the higher ups. And then, like from a strength coach standpoint, he's a constant, communication as well. Just this is what we got. What do you see on these guys? And just they're a great resource because they look at things in a different viewpoint than we do. So just being able to pick their brains on stuff and see try to see things through their eyes to see what we can do for the players.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. It can't be, anything more important than communicating up to the top, especially like you mentioned, having 40-man roster guys who the front office is very invested in. They got to know what's going on. So I totally understand that there. Talk about, this year, new leadership at the top in Corey. He's huge on leadership and building culture, which he's great at. Talk about what it's been like, building a new culture in the athletic training department, and what that's been like for you, for your colleagues at other affiliates, and kind of all the way to the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really great. Just from the first conversation that I had with Corey, back in November, when he was hired, just a really awesome guy. Really cares about us, and really cares about helping us get better, and pushing us to be the best that we can be. And just the everything that he's implemented, like you said, from a culture standpoint, has been really great. I think from our department, the culture and the everything that he's implemented is awesome, is off the chart. And it's just been really good to see the growth that we've had just in the first few months that he's been on board.
Sure. And kind of shifting gears a bit, Adam, you guys are in the midst of a grueling season. It's long for everybody, no matter what level you're at.
Yeah.
Minor league baseball is different than Major League Baseball, as we all know. But it's always an honor to be involved in the game, as many of us know. But it's still tough. You guys sacrifice so much of your life for the game, which is greatly appreciated. How do you manage the demands of so much travel? And just so much to do as a minor league athletic trainer at the AA level, and while also staying kind of sharp and organized and getting done what you have to get done?
I think for me, it's one of those things that you got to stay 2 or 3 days ahead. Like you've always got to think 2 or 3 days ahead, 4 days ahead, and you got to be organized. You got to be, you got to be able to think through things like that and not let things sneak up on you, so to speak, because there's something that's always going to come up. You're always going to show up, and something's going to happen that you don't anticipate, whether, player gets sick, overnight, or, something happens to a player and we've got to take a player to a doctor's appointment. So I think it's something that, just staying calm, staying cool, not letting a moment get too big, just, take every situation, as it comes, handle it, and, try to stay ahead of the things that you can stay ahead of, because, like I said, there's always going to be something that pops up that you don't expect, every day.
Mm-hmm. And kind of within the profession, I know things have changed. There's been a ton of innovation in the past decade or so, probably since you've been in the game. Talk about how technology has changed kind of what you guys do to monitor player health and performance, and how much easier or more efficient it's been able to make the job of an athletic trainer.
Yeah. So one thing that, we do from a pitching standpoint that I really enjoy is, we do fatigue monitoring on pitchers. So, we do that the day after that they pitch, and, we get those numbers, and we're able to track that data and those numbers throughout the year, so we're able to follow that pitcher and see how he progresses throughout the year. And, we're able to use that data, to see, from a recovery standpoint, is that player recovering the way he needs to be? What do we need to do different, from my end, strength, conditioning, nutrition, whatever. What do we need to do different to help this player? If those numbers start, dipping, what do we need to do to help that player? So that's one thing that's that we do here that I really like, and I think it really benefits the players too.
Mm-hmm. And within the entire organization, are there, compared to previous jobs you've had or previous stops, talk about how nice it is as an athletic trainer in 2025, just to have the resources to be able to do things like fatigue monitoring and, a lot of stuff that probably wasn't around when you got started in the profession.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. I mean, because obviously we're here for the players.
Yeah.
Whatever we can do to help, you know, prepare the players, to help recover the players, is awesome. And the tools that we have now compared to just, like you said, 6, 7, 8 years ago is amazing. And just the ability to have these tools at our disposal and to be able to use them and, implement them with players on a day-to-day basis is really awesome. So it speaks a lot to the organization,
Yeah.
investing, in player care, in player health, in recovery, in all these, facets of the game that's so important to, the players and, the players' health.
Mm-hmm. And Adam, kind of looking back on, your time in the minor leagues and throughout baseball, a lot of people want to jump from, an internship with P-Bats. They want to be in the big leagues. They want to get there fast. Talk about how you stay present, stay patient when ultimately, the goal, just like players for many athletic trainers, is to move up the ranks and to eventually maybe, land a big league job, if possible. Talk about how you kind of stay focused mentally and present at the situation that you're at.
Yeah, I try to focus on the day, not worry
Sure.
about tomorrow. I just worry about today, and tomorrow will take care of itself.
Yeah.
Take care of the players today, take care of the coaches today. Do whatever is needed to take care of those guys, and the rest will take care of itself. And you let your work that you do. One thing in a statement that Corey uses a lot is be a walking resume. You know, treat the players good. Do your best every day, and the rest will take care of itself. So that's kind of my mindset. I'll worry about today, not worry about tomorrow. Whatever happens tomorrow is going to happen, and just take care of today and do the best you can today, and let everything else just kind of fall in place.
Yeah, no question. And that's good advice coming from Corey, who, spent a ton of time with the Detroit Tigers, being minor league coordinator of the year multiple times, a year with the Rangers, and now getting his shot to lead the charge in Miami, which is obviously super cool. We're also happy for him. Well, Adam, I know we're in the season, and you're going to be documenting that throughout the year for us at pbats.com. Talk about a bit about what you did in the off season. How do you prepare for a year? What were you doing a couple months ago to get ready? Is it continuing education? Is it learning new skills, reading up on new innovations and technology? What's kind of the off season look like for you?
So the off season for me, outside of taking a few trips and a little downtime,
Yeah.
with family. I try to get in the research, a little more in the off season, try to see what's up and coming, what are the new things that people are trying, what are, what's the new research looking at, where are they going, that type of thing, to, try to add more tools in the toolbox, because you can never have enough tools in the toolbox to use at your disposal throughout the season. So, so from a preparation standpoint, that's kind of, what I do, and also try to knock out some, continuing education courses, whether it's, some manual therapy, or just different courses like that to
Mm-hmm.
continue to strengthen my skills and to continue to develop, my skills to be the best, that I can be, as an athletic trainer.
Mm-hmm. No question. I know it's a constant learning situation for all athletic trainers. There's always so much new technology, new products, new vendors reaching out, and stuff that you guys have to stay on top of. So it's kind of cool to hear how you structure your off season. Well, Adam, last question for today. I know a big part of the series, sharing your journey this year at AA, is giving back to students, to young people who want to be in the profession, people who were, like in your position in 2018, looking to find any information they can about how does this actually work. What advice would you give to those people trying to break into the game and land in professional baseball athletic training ultimately?
I think that my advice would be is, don't be afraid to take that internship position wherever it may be. Don't be afraid to go do it and go in it with an open mind and open ears and, just be a sponge. Excuse me. And also, don't be afraid to send an email. Don't be afraid to send an email to a director or a coordinator about a position, because the worst thing they're going to say is no. Hey, we don't have anything available at this time.
Sure.
So don't be afraid to send an email, and don't be afraid to take that internship, whether it might be in the Dominican, or whatever. Just don't be afraid and go in it, with an open mind and a willing to learn and, ask a lot of questions and don't be afraid. Just,
Yep.
Don't be afraid to take that chance, because you never know, once you get your foot in the door, you never know what's going to come of it. Because as you know, this game is so tight knit and it's such a close family that, you get your foot in the door and, with one organization and you've opened the door to, so many other different teams and positions.
No question about it. It's definitely a tight-knit group, like you mentioned. Once you're involved in PBATS, there's so many people you can run to and talk to about positions or how to do things. It's really an awesome little family we have here. And again, for those listening, you can all follow Adam's journey this year throughout the minor league season at pbats.com on the blog section. And we'll also share those links on our newsletter and social media channels as well. Well, Adam, thanks so much for joining the show. Always appreciate your time, your dedication to PBATS and the profession of athletic training. And we wish you, Corey, and everybody on the Marlins staff the best of luck as this 2025 season continues.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Sam, for putting this on. I really appreciate, you and the time that you put into it, and looking forward to, continuing this throughout the season and looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS and athletic training, visit pbats.com. See you next time.